Joe Waxman, and I am here with Ginat Rice. Ginat has been active in the macrobiotic community for a long time. Many people know her. So, Ginat, how are you?
Allah Akbar, I'll tell you how I am, Joe, is that rather than going on our usual summer jaunts to Scotland, we've been going for several years to work at the Fringe Festival, etc. We are doing a staycation for obvious reasons in an Arab city in the north of Israel.
Mm.
And it's such an amazing experience. It's a different culture, a different language, obviously, a different mentality. It's such an amazing experience. So Ana bit alam Arabi, I'm learning sort of Arabic.
Ah, that's fascinating, and I'd love to hear all about that. But maybe we could start with the beginning of your journey into macrobiotics.
Sure. Well, that was an adventure. I guess everything is in a way. When I was 17, I'm 69 now, so that was several years ago. My parents sent me for a high school graduation present to Israel for a summer program. They were, you could say, armchair Zionists, or they supported Israel, although uh, coming from a small town in Texas. My grandparents were Eastern European, went to Texas when they wanted to leave because that was the only place that would let them in. I mean, how history works. Ellis Island was, I don't know, full, or the German Jews apparently didn't want the Russian Jews, some story. Anyway, so they got shipped literally around to Corpus Christi and entered the US there. And my entire family is from Waco, Texas. So for my parents to sort of make the leap from there to Israel was just an idea for them. Anyway, they sent me, and I had a Jewish affiliation or identity or something, as kids. Maybe we played with lighting Shabbat candles, and that was about the extent of it. And the reason I go into this detail is because when I went to Israel, there was something right there, something that was me. And it was the same experience when I met macrobiotics a few years later, that again, it's one of those things in life that's it, like a wow, like, uh-huh.
So,
So I went to Israel when I
can I
was
just say one
17.
thing? I think it's interesting that your parents landed in Waco, Texas, because most Jewish immigrants from
Right,
Europe came to New York or Philadelphia or the East Coast somewhere, like mine did. But
yeah,
that's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. Well, it is full circle in the sense that my father, who was a professor of law, eventually got a job in Milwaukee, where I was raised, and then in Cherry Hill, just across the river from Camden, where
Cherry Hill,
he
yeah.
taught at Rutgers University. So I went to high school in Cherry Hill High.
Okay,
So came around that way to it.
yeah, that makes more sense.
So, so, Israel at 17, came back as a freshman in college, went again on my own for the next summer at 18. 19, went to Israel for a full year of study in a study abroad program. 20, I finished college and I joined a group of uh, both Israelis and Americans, and we started a new kibbutz on the Golan Heights. So to get to know each other, we would take trips with small groups, for a few people or something, and we would take little car trips around. And on one of these trips, a guy who for some reason we called Jackson, even though that wasn't his name, was vegetarian. And we said, oh, we can do that. So for a week or whatever this trip, we'll all be vegetarian. And that was the beginning for me. So I moved to Israel, started this kibbutz, and the whole thing went along like that. I remained vegetarian. After several years, I realized I'm really not a farmer, and I moved to Jerusalem, which is a city, more my style. And I heard a lecture about macro, micro, something, I didn't really know what it was. I was really into Francis Moore Lepay had a book called,
Right.
what was it called? The Small, I forgot what it's called.
I
And
know what you're talking. I know what book you're. I
yeah,
can't remember
yeah,
what it's called either.
yeah, it slips my mind. Anyway, it really influenced me.
The Eye
And
for a
I
Small
lent it
Planet
to
or
someone.
something.
Thank you. That's the one. That's it. So a friend of mine kind of felt badly that she hadn't returned it in forever and invited me to this lecture. And that was the moment for me in macrobiotics, yin, yang. It just was like, wow, it made sense. It was just, we old macros, oftentimes it wasn't from illness, thank goodness, so much
Mm.
as from the ideas and ideology. And it just was like, wow, here's a way to be vegetarian that has a system to it. And being an orderly person, that really appealed to me. And I remember at that lecture, um, beginning right there, a macrobiotic community, they kind of asked who wants to be part of this or something, and a few of us raised our hands, and we began to study. We brought teachers from abroad. There was a French couple whose name is Richard and Isabelle, or Myriam Gombin, a wonderful, wonderful couple they were from Paris, I assume they are. And we brought them to Israel and they taught us. And I was so taken by it that at the end of that study, they invited me back to Paris with them. And at the end of that study, they said, well, we're going on vacation to Morocco. Would you like to come? So, yes. So I went to Morocco and met a young man and got engaged. I mean, it's just, one thing after another.
Mm.
So I did not get married. I'll just mention that he was this Frenchman from the French-German border in Alsace, and he was discovering Judaism. And here I was, and I was discovering macrobiotics. So we just kind of crossed in the night and had a nice rendezvous, and then kind of it finished. So by that time, I had come back to Israel and I was living in the early study houses. And I remember your mom in her interview talking about those study houses in Brookline,
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And we would, we didn't study so much. I never quite knew why they were called that. We would take turns cooking, and if there was childcare, and kind of just living our lives in community. And I still have many friends. Holly Padrini was in that house. So it was another wonderful experience. So that's my beginning.
Yeah, and well, maybe you didn't study so much in the study house, but you do learn a lot about macrobiotics that way, right?
Exactly. It's practical learning. Exactly right. And during that time, I was a student at the Kushi Institute, which at that time was in Brookline, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, my world was just, just exciting and interesting and engaging. So after I studied level 1, it was called, at the Kushi Institute, I'm ready to go back to Israel. And someone said, no, level 2, that's where really, the meat of it is, you'll excuse the expression. Okay, so they convinced me and I stayed for level 2 and ready to go back home, one foot on the boat. And someone said, well, you've done level 1, you've done level 2, do level 3. Okay,
Mm.
so I finished level 3. That was all there was at that time. And finishing that, and there was a macrobiotic restaurant um, called Satori. It was first called Lodion, and then the name changed at some point to Satori. And they asked me to come and be a chef at the restaurant. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity. So I did. So I stayed more. And I ended up actually co-owning the restaurant. And I worked there for 8 or 10 years or something. Owner was Elisa Alonso, a Spanish woman. I learned Spanish at that time because the whole sort of atmosphere there was Spanish speaking. So that was another incredible experience. And I did that afterwards. And finally got back to Israel. It took a while.
Um, no, I heard there's a lot of, just on a side note, there's a lot of vegetarians in Israel for some reason. I guess that's just,
Number one,
yeah,
number one in the world. God knows why. Right? Uh, we have the most per capita vegetarians ever anywhere.
that's interesting. And just as a comparison, I remember that 30% of Hindus in India are vegetarians. So
Yeah.
it's quite a lot. So it must be even more than that. Anyway, what
Um,
happened? What happened after that?
After that, I came back to Israel and I had studied teaching English as a second language. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I came back here and I went back to the little macrobiotic center that we had founded and formed all those years ago that was still running. And I began to teach just a little bit. And someone told me, oh, there's a macrobiotic potluck dinner going on tonight or tomorrow or whenever it was. Why don't you go? And I remember I made this little apple tart. And the reason I remember that, because it wasn't really my ingredients. And so I just made it very modest, just using, an apple or whatever it was. And I went to the home of the person hosting this macrobiotic dinner, whose name was Sheldon Rice.
Mm.
And I thought that was the main dish or something. And it turned out it was. And I met my husband.
I was
So
curious about that. Is that his birth last name, or is that a name that he chose?
I know people ask. That's why we're macrobiotic. That's his birth name.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. His father was Rabinovich or Rabinowitz, who his father changed the family name to Rice. So Sheldon was born Rice.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. I call him Sweet Rice.
Very good.
So I was teaching English as a second language. Well, I can't really say that. I taught for one day. And my sort of sweet American disposition, I had taught Hebrew actually in America. And I would stand in front of the classroom and I would just be quiet and I would wait for the fifth graders to kind of notice that I was there and I was ready and they would kind of settle down. And I loved to play games with them and just had a wonderful time. Well, in Israel, it doesn't quite work that way. These kids are rambunctious and they really, for all the good and the bad reasons, they can take initiative and they are not followers, they're leaders.
Hmm.
So in children, everyone has his idea and the right way and follow me. And so they were walking on top of the desks and they were just wild. They were really something. So I lasted one day and I remember I came home and Sheldon, I couldn't do it and everything. And he said, great. He said, you were meant or need to be or can be a macrobiotic counselor, and that's what you can do. So I did. I began offering health consultations and guiding people in macrobiotic practice. We started, so many projects. We had a dinner program, first once a week and then a little bit less often after that, where I would cook this huge dinner for maybe 30, 40 people, I don't know, and they would all come over and we would eat this meal together and I would give a little lecture on flavor of the day, whatever I could think of. So since the beginning, I've been teaching and organizing and arranging and offering. So it's been wonderful.
Very good. When was this period? What time? What year?
Okay, right. So I'll start at the beginning. It was 73 when we started this new kibbutz and I became vegetarian and all of that going on. And I was vegetarian for all of those years up until 1980. And 1980 is when I made this lecture and I turned macrobiotics and got on that train. So that was 1980, which means that I'm in my 40th year now of macrobiotic practice.
Uh-huh.
And I remember like when it used to be like, I don't know, your dad or Michael Rossoff, 40 years was like, whoa, and here I am. So that was 80. And then, well, anyway, just continued from there.
And so, well, bring us up to, up to date. Where did things lead to where they are now?
Okay, great. So um, let me just remember how this happened. Oh, yes. So for years, decades or something, Sheldon and I have really enjoyed going to all kinds of macrobiotic summer camps and conferences and gatherings, and both in the US and in Europe. There's the One World, there's all
Hmm.
kinds of things. And we really enjoy teaching and mingling, interfacing, interacting. It was just such a pleasure, so much fun. And at some point, for some reason, I started to think, you know what? It would be great if we had one of these in Israel.
Mm.
Well, why not? And I remember I went to a potluck lunch with my students here well, not here, in Jerusalem. I'm not in Jerusalem, but in Jerusalem anyway. And I remember announcing it very timidly and kind of almost like a whisper to the person next to me. I'm thinking about creating this thing. And then it just, when something's right, how it just develops.
Yeah.
So we named it the Whole Health, what's the name of my thing? Whole Health Forum.
Mm.
And then from there, it developed. We did it for 5 years. Every summer, or in May, actually, when the weather's just nice, we rented a conference center outside Jerusalem and brought in teachers and speakers and activities and entertainment, and just had 5 days of a residential program. People could either stay there or they could come and go one day, every day, whatever they wanted. And it was just wonderful. And a few times we said, oh, okay, that's enough. And then we'd do it and we'd have such a wonderful time. We'd say, okay, one more year. So this year, the no forum, right? There's no forum.
Mm.
And one of actually, there's a ceramicist who would provide beautiful serving platters for the food that we cooked there. And she convinced me or encouraged me to create an online program, which I did. And it really kind of shifted my activity. So I organized and ran a 5-day whole health forum online. And from there, the last day, I kind of got people together and said, well, where shall we go from here? And they suggested a monthly program. So I did that for a while. And then I thought, what do I really want? And of course, it was to focus more on a macrobiotic program, because before that, it was pretty much anything that was natural, holistic, anything kind of new agey, whatever you want to call it. So it wasn't necessarily the M word.
Right.
And now I'm doing this wonderful project called the whole, which you are going to be on. You've agreed kindly
Yes.
to join
Yes.
us. Yeah, the Whole Health Macrobiotic Forum. And it is taking off, Joe. It's just
Oh,
amazing. I've got this month of August completely filled. We're ready to go on
great.
the 2nd, actually, of August. I've got September completely full. I'm
Oh,
working on October, when you will come.
nice.
November has speakers already. So it's just whew, amazing. It's so much fun.
And this is all online, so these people are international, right?
That's right. That's right. A lot from Europe and a lot from America. Because in Israel, to be frank, there's not a big macrobiotic. Um, there are people who talk macrobiotics and kind of are interested, we could say. I don't really know if there's very many teachers.
Yeah, I was curious about that. So the
Mm.
response in Israel, obviously there's less people, so there's going to be less opportunity than, other places. But what can you say any more about that? What was the response like in Israel for macrobiotics?
The response to this program, for example, or the response to my teaching, because I taught we lived in Jerusalem up until 8, 9 years ago, and we had a big community there. I'm sure you are aware that when the teacher leaves, many times the community will not be vibrant as it once was. So during the time when we lived in Jerusalem, we had a strong following, and we had these dinners I mentioned, and I taught classes and just whatever activity, anytime anyone would ask for anything, can you do? Okay, so we did whatever that thing was. So we were active and doing a lot, and cooking and catering and teaching and guiding and, whatever it is, bringing in teachers. We had a period that was really fun where we would bring in teachers from wherever in the world they were. Instead of on Zoom like today, it was actually physical. We brought in Melanie and Simon Waxman. We brought in, I don't know, just every time we'd bring in another teacher or so. Rick Vermeuten from Belgium, Jean van den Heuvel, also Belgium. And we would bring them in, and we would set up tours for them. And we would take them to various cities where I had students and organize lectures for them and counseling. So we just had a great time. So I don't know how I got onto that.
Yeah, no.
But anyhow, I was saying, yeah. So the macrobiotic community, when it's got a leader, is good. They show up for these Zoom talks now that we're doing. On their own, they have some kind of potlucks, and they're not, I can't really say that they are really strong macrobiotic. Macrobiotics obviously is much more than the food. I mean, of course, right? And they're missing the spirit maybe that comes from years of good eating. One of my favorite things to see is macrobiotic children, people like yourself and people who have been born and raised and macrobiotic with macrobiotic parents. The feeling, there's nothing more that embodies macrobiotics than that. It's so nice to see.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I'm curious, did Michio ever make it to Israel? Did you ever get him to come?
No, we talked about it many times. No, he didn't. I have a funny Michio story, since you mentioned him, is that, of course, I was his student for all those years, since 1982, actually, is when I went to Boston to the KI to study, and went to his home many times and whatever. And then when I left Israel, went back to the States, I was out of touch with him for all that time. And I finally saw him after many years. I can't remember how many, at least a dozen or something. And I saw him at a summer conference, and he looked at me, and he kind of stepped back, and he's kind of, "Ooh," he said, "much better." Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. So what's the big plan in your perspective, and for your whole health forum, or in just otherwise in general? What's the big vision, the dream, as we say in macrobiotics sometimes?
Yeah. Well, the thing that comes to mind to answer would be the thing that I said is lacking, which is having people here really embrace macrobiotic vision or macrobiotic lifestyle, rather than just having a recipe here or a meal there or something. That's the thing that's missing. That if I could influence that and find even a few that get fired up the way I did, that would be wonderful.
So
thank you, because I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, so spread macrobiotics in Israel. Is that what you'd say?
Voila. Yeah.
And what do you think? What do you think it needs to have that manifest?
It needs just a few people who then will become teachers, who then, spread it out. It doesn't take a revolution. It's an evolution.
Very good. I've never been to Israel. My mom grew up there till age 16.
I
Uh,
know.
so I really should visit because I guess I have roots there. But um,
I don't know about should. You certainly are welcome.
now let's see. What do you think um, the Macrobiotic community at large, um, in all your years of experience, what are some things that you think uh, could definitely improve about the Macrobiotic community?
It's interesting that when Misha was here, especially earlier days, there was such a focus and a concentration, much more young, right?
Hmm.
We all kind of looked there. And now we have various different centers. Your dad has SHI, and there's various places around. And I remember thinking, wow, how's that going to work? You know, that's going to be weird when there's not like the Pope or the the person to kind of make the decisions, the king. And I think it's fine now. I think that it's a more yin expression, uh, meaning the community is more um, dispersed.
Hmm.
And I don't see any problem, which is not answering your question. I don't see any problem with it. So, what do we need to do or change or develop?
Yeah,
Um,
what's your perspective about that?
well, the thing again that comes to mind is what if we could create an online, I'm supposing, um, event, something like the summer conferences used to be, and I'm assuming it would be online so that people could come from all over because not everyone can travel to be together all the time. I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. It's a nice idea. Maybe
Well,
there's my next project.
well, that's sort of like what you're doing with the whole health forum, bring people online, and that seems to be the general trend of things these days, not just in macrobiotics, but around the world
Hmm.
because of
Right.
COVID-19 and all that. Um, and it's interesting that you brought it. You said it's more dispersed, and I just want to make mention that I heard that the Kushi Institute in Amsterdam is closing its doors, unfortunately. So that's
Right.
that's and then Chico passed, so there is some holes that
Yeah.
have been there for a long time and are now missing. And I guess it also represents an opportunity for new things to take its place, which uh, you know your whole health forum could be one of those things and other things. So, what else? What else? What else can you tell me about? What else? I mean, what else are you doing in your life that's important to you?
Okay, there is one thing. Uh, pooh, 10, 15, whatever years ago. Uh, and this, I don't even remember the story of how this was initiated. I got involved in palmistry, in
Ah,
reading hands and reading palms.
that's
And
cool.
I've been developing this. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think originally I saw it as a form of diagnosis, which could be very specific and very helpful. And it turns out that my study shows that it's more rather than physical condition, it's more personality. That
Mm.
you can see very specific things. You can see, um, I'll give you an example. You'll excuse me that it's the middle finger here, but anyway. So,
Okay.
yeah, can you see that this middle finger in me is not really straight right here? It kind of bends sideways. I don't know if you
Mhm.
can see that, but anyway,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that's something very specific, which shows that when I was a child, between the ages of about 4, when I become cognizant of myself, until about teenage years, when I become more independent, my family moved, which was indeed the case. And it means then that my decision making is not so easy because my whole world, which was whatever it was, all of a sudden got replaced with something completely other and different. So
Mhm.
when I want to make a decision today as an adult, it's like, well, wait a minute, what's real or what's, because each finger has a specific representation, and the middle one is my true self, rather than this one is persona, how I present myself. The middle finger is who I really am. And when it's skewed like that, it's hard for me to really know who I am, in a sense, and therefore how to make a decision. So I'm giving a very specific example just to show how precise it can be. And I just find it very interesting, and there's so much to learn. And I enjoy very much sitting with a person one-to-one and giving a personal reading and telling them things. It's like looking in the mirror and saying, yes, it's not something you didn't know because it's you. It's things that we don't see because we can't see our own face.
Right.
The word face in Hebrew is panim, and the word inside in Hebrew is pnim. So panim, pnim. It's almost the same word. It's the same consonants, just the vowels change. And the vowels, or don't know, are not really letters. They're just diacritical dots or lines or something like that. So between panim and panim, our face shows our inside, which is a tenet of macrobiotic diagnosis.
Yeah.
So that's always interesting, yeah.
That is interesting. I think palmistry is it's great, and it perfectly fits in with macrobiotics, and we need some real, solid palmistry experts. So good for you on that. I maybe one day you can look at my hands.
With pleasure. Your father is a very good palm reader too.
Oh, he is.
Yeah, because I'll tell him stuff which is so specific, and he'll say, "Yeah, that's right," or "I know," or he'll tell me more about it. Or
yeah, I've learned a lot from him about it as well, so I know a few things. But so that's very interesting. Do you do readings for people?
Oh yeah, whenever I can. Yeah, at any opportunity.
Nice.
We had an interesting experience in the town that we live in Israel, which is on the Mediterranean. It's just south of Haifa, between Tel Aviv and Haifa on the coast. And they have this beautiful pedestrian walkway. And we would go there on Saturdays and sit out, and people would walk past and, might stop or might not stop. And all of a sudden we got this inspiration when we put a big sign up. We have this roll-up sign that says palmistry, and Sheldon does numerology, and we put a little notice on it that said free today. So because we thought, I'd rather give it away for free than sit around and wait and hope that someone stops or something. Joe, people started lining up. They were like, no, I was next, no, my turn, like that. And they would all give tips. And we made much more money than we did when we charged, $10 a pop or whatever. So.
Oh, cool. Very good. So now you know the right way to do it, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when we go to summer camps also, I like to offer it. We teach each year until this year on Sandy's macrobiotic cruise. Vegan cruise, sorry, that got switched. And I teach palmistry and offer sessions. So it's really fun.
Very good. Now, can you elaborate a bit more on the Whole Health Forum? What is the format for that? Just describe it a bit more in detail.
The way that I have set it up, and it can always change, is that we start at 2 p.m. Israel time, which is 7 a.m. East Coast time. I chose those times in order to try to get both audiences. It's a little early for the West Coast guys. And I take 6 teachers, each one for a period of about 45 minutes. That way, if they go a little bit over and if people want to ask questions, and it's a long stretch, so I wanted some time in between for people to, move around a little bit and go have a bite or whatever it is. So we have 6 teachers from 2 p.m. Israel time, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the last one, 7 o'clock, is 9 a.m. on the West Coast. So noon, East Coast. So I get my American teachers towards the end of the day, so they'll be awake. And I ask the teachers to really present whatever it is that is most interesting for them. And whatever turns you on, you have offered to teach yin and yang. And
Yes.
that's great. I really appreciate that. So as long as it's either by a macrobiotic person and or on a macrobiotic so-called subject, that's what I want.
So you have these presenters, and it's what, like something like this over Zoom, like a Zoom webinar?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And there for the participants, there's some time to ask questions and have some dialogue.
Right. So I'm the hostess, which means that if they have a question or something, they'll type it into the chat, and then I can interrupt or not as the speaker prefers. And then at the end of it, we can open it up to more questions.
Sounds fascinating. I think it should be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And how is it like in Israel for you trying to practice macrobiotics? Do you have to do it differently up there with the climate, or?
Well, right. In the beginning of my practice in Israel, which was the beginning, every time I would come back to the US to visit relatives or something, I would say, well, look at, they have mochi, or you have fu, or you have natto, or you have whatever it was. We have a much more basic kind of offering here or something. So I learned to make natto, and I never learned to make fu, but I even tried tofu one time, or tempeh. Anyway, tempeh we get. So, at first I used to bring back suitcases full of ingredients. And little by little, I realized that it's nice and fun and great and everything, and I don't really need it. I mean, I can do without mochi as much as I love it, right? Misha said there are two kinds of parties in the world, political parties, what was it? Natto. He said there's the pro-natto and the anti-natto party,
right.
and mochi unites the world. So anyway, so that's one thing, is the ingredients. And I really find that, it's, my new word in Arabic is kulo tamam, means everything's fine. And yes, it's hot here, and I think it's hot in the States too.
Right now,
I don't know. I mean, yeah. So less, there's obvious less long cooked and more light food, and the usual kind of thing. So I don't know if it's that much different.
So it wasn't a big adjustment for you. I mean,
no, it was more the ingredients. Yeah.
Can you mail order specialty ingredients, or that's hard?
Theoretically, maybe. And I haven't ever done it because I haven't found anyone who would actually ship to here. And if they would, I hate when people say they can't, and if they do. And if they would, the price would be off the wall.
Okay.
So if people come to visit, I say, could you just put a little bit of mochi in your suitcase, or whatever it is that I'm missing? And as I said, less and less need or interest.
Well, I can totally relate, because I'm on a budget a lot of the times, and a lot of these foods are expensive. So I've learned to make a lot of these things on my own, and I've become quite adept at home food processing, and I love it, actually. So when I want something, I have to really want it, because I got to make, like natto.
What is your 9-star key?
I'm a 611.
Oh, okay, middle. All right.
And how about you?
Strong. Well, I've got a 4 in me, 445. And 4 loves to do projects. We love to do the whole health forum, and we love to do kitchen projects and things like that.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Well, Ginat, what else do you have to talk about? What else do you want to share with us?
Well, I feel really lucky in a way to be based in Israel, because I feel like I have the best of Israel. I have access to Europe. It's the place, if we want to fly somewhere, it's the easiest place to get to. And I have US roots and experience. We do go there. We had been going every year. So I feel like I have the best of all worlds.
You
We've
cut
got
out there a
so
little
much
bit.
going on.
I missed some of the last things you said.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
I see. Well, I was giving appreciation
Yeah.
for being able to access Israel and Europe and the US.
How's
It's
it?
a real opportunity.
Just curious. Was the pandemic, was that as severe as in other places in the world? Like, was everything shut down?
Right. Well, of course, I don't know other places. We shut down, and at the first round of COVID-19, it was new, and everyone was very gung ho and let's do this right. And the prime minister came on and really led the country, and everyone took it seriously as they should, I suppose. I don't know the word should. And this time around, it's more difficult. I'm sure that's not just us, for everybody, because everyone's kind of been there, done that, fed up, and yalla, I want to get back to work, and how long can I do this? And my American relatives get very upset when I say that. Are you familiar with the beard mask? Everyone wears the mask around their chins.
Yeah.
So, they want to be complicit and they don't want to be complicit.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah. So Israelis are a little bit more laid back, I think, than Americans. My experience that Americans really stick by the rules for good and for bad. Really count on them and they're going to do something. Whereas here, it's a little bit easier, kind of like, well, okay.
I like that style better.
For
I'm
good
not,
and for
I'm,
bad.
when people are really like sticklers for the rules, it kind of, it brings out my rebellious side. I want to do things the wrong way.
Yeah.
like not wear my mask or whatever, but so.
We have a special word just for that. It's called dafka. And dafka means if you say so, I'm not going to do it.
That's
That's
me.
dafka.
That's what
I'm going
to. That's what embodies my personality a lot.
Yeah. Do you, Joe? Do you feel like? Do you feel that a person with a true good macrobiotic practice, has no worries for COVID-19, or do you not go there?
I pretty much think so. I haven't really seen much. I mean, I think it's blown way out of proportion. I think it's very political. So yeah, I mean, there's both sides, but I do think that macrobiotic people, if they're practicing well, don't really have much to worry about with it. I haven't heard otherwise. Let's put it that way. I haven't heard any macrobiotic people complaining about it. So
yeah.
Well, what else? What do you have any final things you want to share with us? Because I don't have any more questions for you. So
What was it? Okay. I've forgotten now. You asked that question at the end of your mom's interview, and she thought a minute. And what was it she said? Something like, that wasn't the word, some idea like unity or cooperation, some kind of word like that. She said, let's all work together.
Yeah, cooperation. Yeah,
Yeah.
she.
Yeah.
I think I asked her. I don't know what advice she could offer or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you agree with her then? Cooperation is what we need. I agree too.
Would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, it's wonderful work that you're doing, Joe, to have these interviews.
Thank
really
you.
Nice.
I mean, my inspiration is really just pro macrobiotics. I'm not out for myself alone. I want to, help others and help myself and bring together macrobiotics. And we all have, we're all going to have different perspectives. We're all going to have slightly different ideas about macrobiotics, about how to teach it, about how to practice it, about what needs to be done. And that's okay. I don't think we should let that get in the way of the greater macrobiotic movement. Whether you think veganism is very important or you just think, judgment or however you want to perceive it, because everyone's going
Right.
to have a slightly different take on all that. I really think macrobiotics has a place not only right now, but in the future. I think macrobiotics is just in its infancy, and when we can come together in this world in a more like so-called like the new age, the age of enlightenment, the golden age, that's when macrobiotics is really going to flourish. And we're just sort of establishing ourselves right now for the next era of humanity that is coming. That macrobiotics really belongs in the next age, and we're just and this is just the early
Bravo,
blooming.
bravo.
You know, there's still snow on the ground, and we're just like the crocuses peeking out. So that's my vision, and that's what I want to, foster and grow macrobiotics for. Because I'm only 44, so I got a long way to go, and I want to live over 100. So,
Yeah.
if I make macrobiotics my life, then I am a future senior macrobiotic teacher, and therefore it has to have longevity, because I still have many years to go. So
Well, what a beautiful way to end this discussion, this conversation. It's really nice.
very good.
I'm really glad to hear that.
So you have your Whole Health Forum. Do you have any websites, or do you have any books or anything else that you want to mention?
I do have this book that's self-published. I got ill. I had breast cancer um, 20 years ago. I don't even remember. Anyway, and of course, it pulled the rug. Here, I just asked you about, are we all immune from COVID-19? I assumed I was immune from any illness, and then here I got this, and it it turned out to be a genetic condition, a family thing. Still, I developed and expressed it, and it was such a huge event in my life that I finally got out the end of it. I wanted to understand why. And it just coincided with my husband's, with Sheldon's retirement from work. So we went to the US. We bought a motorhome, the smallest one that we could find that we could fit in. And we traveled for 3 years. And we
Nice.
went all over the United States. And everywhere I went, I would seek out macrobiotic friends and I would interview them. And I would ask everyone the same question. And I would ask them, how do you understand what illness is? And did you get ill? And why do you think so? And what does it require to recover? And I mean, just all of these really deep questions. It was just, I talked to, just hundreds of people. I interviewed Misha, I interviewed Lucci, if you remember her. I interviewed Judy McKinney, and just lots and lots of people. And it was such a deep, interesting work. So that's my book. And it's on my website, which is The Rice House. What else? TheRiceHouse.com. And the Whole Health Forum is on that same website. Facebook, the usual.
Oh, very good. So people can check that out. And I, of course, have my website, themacrobioticdiet.com, which this interview and all interviews will be featured on, as well as my YouTube. And I am hosting through my website upcoming webinar from my mother, who will be teaching, Judy Floor. She calls it, "What is Family Unity?" So she wants to talk about the importance of family and macrobiotics and food and everything else around that subject. So that's on August 15th. I hope some people will sign up for that.
Okay.
That'll be fun and interesting. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to me for an interview, they're certainly welcome to. If you have a macrobiotic story to share, new or old, as long as it's interesting and pro macrobiotic, then yeah, I'm willing to have people on. There's Sheldon, I guess. Hi.
Can you see Sheldon over there? Yeah.
Yes.
So get him on.
Yeah. He's certainly welcome. So, any final words, Ginat?
Final words. I need some final words. Final words. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the work you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Very good. All right. Well, I guess that's it.
All right
So
then. Okay
thanks so
then.
much for letting me interview you, and it's been great. And
Great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Joe.
absolutely. Bye now.
Bye bye.